Two members of the United States Supreme Court still want to allow ghost guns created at home from kits without serial numbers to be used to commit crimes in America. Justice Gorsuch, in writing the majority opinion, which upheld the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Bureau's interpretation that if you're buying a kit to make a gun at home, it should be registered with a serial number, and you should be getting a background check.
Trump thought he had the Supreme Court in his pocket like loose change. But guess what? Even his hand-picked judges just told him no way on ghost guns. You heard that right. The same Supreme Court everyone said would do whatever Trump wanted just sided with Biden. And the look on Trump's face when he found out? Priceless. Stick around to see conservative justices actually caring about people getting shot. Hey, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button. We know you want to. Go ahead, we'll wait. All right, appreciate it. Now, back to the video. Ever wonder what happens when Trump's handpicked judges don't follow the script? It ain't pretty, folks. Our former president has made a habit of bragging about his Supreme Court appointments like they're employees at Trump Tower. He's repeatedly boasted that he has total control over the Supreme Court. Literally his words, not mine. The man talks about justices like they're pets who should roll over on command. Gun rights advocates were feeling pretty cocky too. They were absolutely convinced the Supreme Court would side with them on ghost guns. Why wouldn't they? The conservative majority on the bench seemed like a slam dunk for the gun lobby. Fox News hosts were practically breaking out the champagne before the ruling, confidently telling viewers that ghost guns would remain completely unregulated, their smug faces aged like milk left out in the Florida sun. Then came the vote. Not 5-4, not even 6-3, a shocking 7-2 decision.
More than 10,000 of them used in 2022 and 2023 to commit crimes alone. I'm Michael Popok. We got breaking news at the United States Supreme Court level. The Gun Control Act of 1968 passed in the wake of the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination and that of Robert F. Kennedy. To ghost guns, kits you buy to build your gun at home, or in this case, 3D print your gun at home in many circumstances.
7 justices said, actually, these untraceable weapons might be a teeny tiny problem for public safety. And who led this rebellion against MAGA expectations? None other than Neil Gorsuch, Trump's very first Supreme Court pick. Talk about an ungrateful employee. Trump probably wanted to tweet, "You're fired," but well, you know. Gorsuch's majority opinion was a far cry from what gun advocates expected. Instead of championing unlimited gun rights, he expressed genuine concern about public safety, writing that background check requirements seek to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. How dare a conservative justice care about keeping weapons away from criminals? That wasn't in the MAGA playbook at all. The social media fallout was absolutely delicious. Gun advocates went from confident predictions to complete meltdowns faster than Trump changes his legal team. The comment sections filled with all caps outrage and accusations of betrayal. Gorsuch is a traitor, screamed one particularly spicy post. Another claimed the justice must have been compromised by the deep state, because clearly the only explanation for a conservative justice caring about public safety is a vast conspiracy, right? What makes this ruling so fascinating is that it shatters the myth that Trump's judicial appointments are just partisan puppets. Gorsuch didn't just join the majority, he authored the opinion. He was the ringleader of this conservative mutiny. The man Trump personally selected to be his judicial champion looked at the evidence and basically said, these ghost gun manufacturers are clearly trying to exploit a loophole, and we're not falling for it. This wasn't supposed to happen. Trump has repeatedly claimed his justices would rule his way on everything from elections to guns. He's treated the Supreme Court like it's the judiciary wing of MAGA Inc. But this ruling exposes the cracks in what many assumed was a totally partisan court. Even conservatives can occasionally put public safety ahead of political loyalty.
The question here was an arcane one, but it's what the case turned on. Whether the Gun Control Act as applied to these types of kits, it doesn't mean that by by kit, depending upon the type of kit. Could there be an argument that it comes out from under the Gun Control Act? Yes. An interesting grouping here, not in the dissent. Alito and Thomas once again find a way to stand forth death and destruction in America.
Who knew? The ghost gun ruling represents something potentially bigger than just one case. It suggests that at least some conservative justices might occasionally prioritize legal reasoning over partisan outcomes. Shocking concept, I know. Perhaps they occasionally remember those oaths they took about upholding the Constitution rather than pleasing their presidential benefactor. For Trump, this has to sting. The man who demands absolute loyalty from everyone around him just got a very public reminder that Supreme Court justices serve lifetime appointments, not at the pleasure of the president. They don't owe him anything anymore, and at least in this case, 7 of them, including his own appointee, chose to follow the law rather than follow Trump's expectations. Those 7 justices weren't just defying Trump, they were responding to something genuinely terrifying. What exactly are these ghost guns that managed to make conservative Supreme Court justices side with gun control advocate? Imagine this: weapons without serial numbers that can't be traced, built at home with no background check, and ready to fire in less time than it takes to bake cookies. These aren't sci-fi movie props, they're real, and they're flooding American streets. Ghost guns are basically DIY weapon kits that come without those pesky serial numbers that help police track down criminals. Think of them as the IKEA furniture of firearms, except instead of a wobbly bookshelf, you get a deadly weapon that exists completely off the books. No documentation, no trace, no problem. Well, huge problem actually.
Forget concealed weapons permits, forget training, forget background checks, forget it all violated unless Alito and the people that joined with him there, and there was a majority, that the Gun Control Act only applies to assembled weapons, the receiver and the frame put together in a gun. When it's only together and can be fired, is it a weapon that can be controlled by the statute? This is reproduced in the actual decision. At the top is an actual firearm. At the bottom is what gets sent to somebody that ordered one of these kits.
The photos in Gorsuch's opinion tell the whole story. Side by side, you can see the kits next to fully assembled guns, and guess what? They're practically identical. The only difference? A few plastic tabs to remove and some screws to insert. That's it. That's the manufacturing these companies claim turns ordinary folks into gun makers exempt from regulations. These aren't complex engineering projects requiring special skills. According to Gorsuch's opinion, some of these ghost gun kits can be completed in as little as 30 minutes using tools you probably already have in your garage. 30 minutes! You can't even get through an episode of The Bachelor that fast. The gun manufacturers have been playing this cute game where they market these things as innocent hobby kits for enthusiasts. Harmless fun for gun enthusiasts, right? Well, the police tell a different story. These untraceable weapons are showing up at crime scenes across America, leaving investigators with 0 leads on where they came from or who owned them. This is exactly why the Biden administration argued these kits were designed specifically to exploit loopholes in existing gun laws. The manufacturers knew exactly what they were doing, selling what are essentially complete firearms while pretending they're just components. It's like selling a cake but claiming it's just ingredients because you haven't put the frosting on yet. The loophole these companies found was both simple and devious. The Gun Control Act requires serial numbers and background checks for firearms. But what if you sell a gun that's 99% complete and call it a kit instead? According to these companies, that means it's not technically a gun yet, even though it takes minimal effort to make it fully functional. It's like if I sold you a car without a steering wheel, told you it wasn't actually a car because you couldn't drive it yet, and then handed you the steering wheel in a separate package with a wink. That's the level of absurdity we're dealing with here. What makes this ruling so significant is that it closes this ridiculous loophole. The court recognized that when something walks like a gun and talks like a gun, it should be regulated like a gun, even if the manufacturer sticks a totally not a gun, wink wink label on it. The justices saw through this charade. When looking at these kits, they didn't see harmless hobby projects. They saw what they really are: deliberate attempts to circumvent laws designed to keep dangerous weapons out of dangerous hands. Even for conservative justices who typically favor gun rights, this was a bridge too far. When police can't trace weapons used in crimes because they have no serial numbers, that's not a Second Amendment issue. It's a public safety crisis that affects everyone, regardless of political affiliation. While 5 conservative justices joined their liberal colleagues in prioritizing public safety, Alito and Thomas were busy crafting arguments so disconnected from reality they might as well have been written in crayon. These two judicial dinosaurs stood alone in dissent, apparently living in some parallel universe where a gun kit that takes 30 minutes to assemble isn't actually a gun at all. It's like arguing your IKEA furniture isn't really a bookshelf until you've inserted that final screw. Let's dive into the mind-boggling logic these two justices used. Alito, with all the confidence of someone who's never had to worry about gun violence in his neighborhood, argued that the Gun Control Act only applies to fully assembled weapons. According to his brilliant legal mind, regulating these ghost gun kits is unreasonable. Well, despite the fact that these kits are basically 99% complete firearm. I guess that last 1% makes all the difference in Alito's world. It's like saying a cake isn't really a cake until you've put the last cherry on top. Thomas, not to be outdone in the ridiculous arguments department, claimed that the Gun Control Act from 1968 couldn't possibly have intended to include modern ghost guns. Gee, you think? Next, he'll be telling us the founding fathers didn't mention TikTok in the Constitution, so it must be unconstitutional. This argument completely ignores the obvious fact that laws are written broadly to adapt to changing technologies. Luckily, Justice Gorsuch, you know, the guy Trump appointed, actually has his head screwed on straight. He demolished Thomas and Alito's weak arguments by pointing out that the law was specifically designed to adapt to new gun technologies. Gorsuch reminded his colleagues that the definition of a firearm includes any weapon that can readily be converted to expel a projectile. But apparently, this concept was too complex for Alito and Thomas to grasp. The most disturbing part, while these two justices nitpicked over technical definitions, they completely ignored the explosion of ghost gun crimes, from 1,000 to over 19,000 in just a few years. That's 19,000 untraceable weapons used in crimes. But hey, why let real-world consequences interfere with abstract legal theories? Legal commentator Michael Popock didn't hold back when criticizing these two out-of-touch justices. He pointed out that Alito and Thomas are protected by federal marshals, while regular Americans face the dangers of gun violence daily. Must be nice to make rulings from the safety of armed protection, while the rest of us deal with the consequences of untraceable weapons flooding our streets. Popock didn't stop there. He blasted Alito and Thomas for their apparent disregard for public safety, suggesting their positions reflect a complete disconnect from the realities of gun crime in America. While these justices sit comfortably behind layers of security, their dissent would have allowed more untraceable weapons to proliferate in communities already struggling with gun violence. What's really telling about this ruling is how it crushes one of Trump's favorite narratives. Remember how he constantly brags about appointing his judges who will always rule in his favor? Well, this case proves that fantasy has gone up in smoke. His very first Supreme Court pick not only voted against the position Trump supported, but wrote the majority opinion explaining why ghost guns need regulation. Talk about a plot twist. It turns out that at least some of Trump's appointees actually take their jobs seriously and follow the law rather than political loyalty. What a concept! Even more embarrassing for Trump, Gorsuch was joined by other conservative justices who apparently value public safety over rigid ideology. For a guy who demanded total loyalty from everyone around him, this has got to sting. So here we are, folks, with the biggest plot twist since Trump claimed he was the fittest president ever. The Biden administration just scored a major win with this Supreme Court ruling that forces ghost gun manufacturers to actually follow the rules like the rest of us. 7 justices, including Trump's own guy, agreed that maybe letting people build untraceable weapons without background checks isn't the brightest idea. And Trump? Silent as a mouse. The guy who never shuts up suddenly has nothing to say when his perfect court doesn't play along. Legal experts are already saying this ruling could change how we regulate all kinds of firearms going forward. So next time some MAGA hat tells you the Supreme Court is Trump's personal puppet show, just point to this ghost gun ruling. Even his handpicked justices couldn't ignore basic reality. Some things are just too obvious, even for the most partisan judges. And that, my friends, is what we call justice actually working.